Lock name: PEXU Deathlog. Author: Nolan Dwight. Call sign: November 1. We all thought it was a joke at the mission briefing. This was back in the mid-80s. Many of us were group veterans from tours in Indochina and assisting the Mooch in Afghanistan. However, when the FBI liaison showed us the slides, some of us were sick to our stomach, and none of us could believe it. All across Minnesota, homesteads, cabins, ransacked and torn apart by what was officially just non-connected encounters with bears and wolves. However, unofficially, the culprit were ape men that were near 8 feet tall and weighed 1,000 pounds. We all thought it was just myths. Bigfoot sightings were becoming more and more frequent. But to us, we were about as grounded as you could come with all of our training and time on the line. That was until he showed us those that were killed. Men, women, young or old, even children, gnawed on, torn apart, mutilated. Something about that made my blood run cold. These weren't myths. They were real living things that were in our backyards and were killing indiscriminately. From there on, we all knew what we had to do. We just didn't know what kind of hell we were walking into. 76 hours of straight hell and war. It wasn't just 1 or 2. It was a family of 7. I'll never know truly what we saw out there. What pulled our comm sergeant into the trees and tore him limb from torso. But I know this. There's things out there that have been here much longer than we have, and they challenge our claim as the dominant species of this planet without breaking a sweat. The governments, all of them, know about them. And it's not just in North America. It's in Africa, Europe, Asia, everywhere. What I do know is that sightings of cryptids have become less frequent and more bathed in skepticism. But what I also do know is that the amount of people disappearing has quadrupled. We're fighting a war, and we are losing. That's an excerpt from an anonymous source within the United States Special Operations community. The truth of what he says has been talked about in speculation. However, I've learned firsthand it was a premonition of what this generation's warfighter's next opponent was going to be. It's no secret that we live in a very strange world. Places like the Appalachian Mountains have been around as long as Pangea has been formed and have underwater. The Western Plains are filled with things that are taboo just to speak about, let alone go looking for. The forests of Europe are filled with tales of demons that stretch back to shadow men attacking and killing Roman soldiers. The deserts of Africa consume the fiercest foes and leave nothing but scraps of their uniforms and black strings as omens. There's a reason, no matter the distance, every single culture has their own interpretation of the devil, dragons and shapeshifters that rhyme and seem far too similar. Honestly, it's amazing that our species has made it as far as we have. However, whatever is happening is far from over. Honestly, as technology has advanced, our curiosity has deepened, and we've gone to further and further lengths to peer exactly where we shouldn't. NATO has been fighting a secret war for decades, and their enemies aren't human. So you're probably wondering, hey author, if this is so secret, why are we just hearing about it? And how are you able to talk about it? Well, put simply, I'm in an interesting situation, and you don't have to. My name is Dwight Nolan. You won't find much looking for me, as I have been scrubbed from the larger part of the internet and world, with only a few scraps left behind. I was in the United States Army for 10 or so years before I took to security contracting. It's there that I was a security guard who was hired to protect an estate. Things went south, very south, north for a bit, then went lateral. It was complicated, but that was years ago. Now, well, I got out of the army for several specific reasons. 4 tours to Afghanistan had left its wear and tear on my mind. One of the perks of being part of the most deployed unit in the US Army's 10th Mountain Division, climb to glory and all that garbage. I wanted to get back to the normal world and live a normal life. Normal. What a fucking fool I was. Turns out, this world is 9 miles from anarchy and 2 feet from the abyss. And those who control everything pay a pretty dime for men like I was to man the wall and keep the monsters at bay. Here I was thinking, it was metaphorical. There's a reason explorers wrote, "Here be dragons," in the hopes to ward off anyone from venturing where many of their friends hadn't returned from. However, the indomitable human spirit is coupled with the unstoppable human curiosity that has resulted in 100,000 people going missing every single year. Where do I factor into all of this? Well, shortly after my southern Missouri hell ride, I got an offer from a suit named Xavier. I still don't know if that's his real name or an alibi, and I don't really care. I sure as shit didn't back then. You know what's the hard part about this world? Making a difference takes blood, sweat, and tears, and it seems futile if the elite are working against you. After I got a termination letter, a fat check, and got told to make myself scarce or find myself disappeared, I did, and I felt like a coward. I moved out west for a while, laid low, but no matter how much I tried, no amount of denial or alcohol could smother the conflict I had internally. So, after 2 years, I decided to accept the offer Xavier made me just over a year later. Pit in my stomach formed as I knew I was casting myself back into the same rabbit hole few ever got a chance to crawl out of. But, well, let's just say I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't. So I've been gone for quite a few years. It's been a roller coaster, but it's been productive. That being said, coming to terms with everything hasn't been the easiest, and I need some way to process everything. So, I made a request that was surprisingly accepted. Catalog what's been happening. Why was it greenlit? Your guess is as good as mine. Maybe they want to make sure whatever is leaked is in line with what they want. Or maybe they don't think anyone will believe it anyways. Maybe Xavier realizes that sooner or later, I was gonna end up whistleblowing anyways, so he wanted to ensure it was sanctioned for a better look. Either way, here we are. And boy, I have got a lot to say. But it's best if we start at the beginning, for me at least. The group I work for is called PEXU, Paranormal Extermination Unit. I know, very clever. You'll find it listed on no public documents, government websites, or dossiers. But it's a very real multinational organization with a serious amount of funding behind it. A wise man once said, designation means authorization. PEXU has a lot of units behind it, some you may have heard of. 4th Special Forces Group based out of Fort Bragg were the first to be inducted and assigned, and they have laid a lot of the groundwork for what was to come. We've got my old friend, Nicholas Walker, to thank for that. There's been other instances. A group of Danish frogmen went dark in the marshes not too long ago. Polish Grom have been on the front line of this brutal war, and the only thing holding it back from Europe. There's been other occurrences with the 22nd SAS having gotten into something particularly hairy, though I'll let the Brits tell that tale. They'll never shut up if I don't. There's also a SEAL team that had to go dark recently, Team 4. Hopefully, they'll be back. That being said, everything can or should be handled by the wholesale special operations units. Sometimes, there's a threat occurring that can be handled by less personnel. And right now, we're strapped, and our big guns are always getting sent out. Can't always bring a machine gun to a fist fight. I mean, I would. But, anyways, solo missions are a common occurrence, as there are a lot of single PEXU operators, especially people who can travel, have jurisdiction over a large area, or can conduct them without making ripples, but always those who have dealt with an incredible amount of shit in the darkness and come out the last one standing. If you hunt monsters, there's a good chance you're going to end up in a trap one day, surrounded. So if you get sent, you better be able to unfuck yourself or fuck up whoever you can on the way down. The career of a solo isn't without its kinks, and by God, mine was. Well, that's probably a good place to start. The beginning. Dossier. Clown House. I could feel the blood pumping through my veins full force when they sent me the information on my first target package. I had regretted not taking the opportunity from PEXU for so long that I blamed myself for every missing person and mutilated body that was found 200 yards in forsaken ground. So when they got back to me, and I finally had the chance to jump into things again, I was both fired up and absolutely fucking terrified. Why? Well, let's recount. The last time this happened, I was pushing mid-30s, running through the woods, nearly getting by every Midwest windy fucker that popped out of the brush. Despite my pretty stacked resume in helping to defeat that sizable event that my direct contact at PEXU called one of the most extreme outbreaks we've seen in a while. It only takes one. So as I sat there in my quiet home, my fax machine slowly printing out the pages, I knew there was no going back. My first mission saw me dispatched to southern Ohio, where a suburban town was being attacked by a clown. Yeah, I know, but just trust me on this one. The anomaly was first seen manifesting itself towards the outskirts and less populated areas, seeming to be like a bad rerun of the clown pandemic that occurred a decade or so again. Except where locals found this creepy, yet funny. It stopped being humorous when they discovered the body of a child in a nearby creek. One day, the clowns stopped appearing at the edges of town and started making their way in. Locals would describe the chime of an ice cream truck. Except wrong in every way. The only photo available was a half-blurred image taken as someone hit beside the window. The exterior was rusted, paint dry and warped to all hell as what was probably blue and yellow looked like teal in decay. And the audio of the soundbite, let's just say I never thought some bullshit jingle would give me chills. But here I am. It was described as off-putting, though people mostly avoided it. Until the kid in question managed to sneak out and apparently ran up to the ice cream truck and was never seen again, alive. I remember reading that shit, sitting there white-knuckling the page. The good and bad about being in this industry is that you're extremely informed, and if your intel can help it, you won't miss a detail. The bad is, you get every detail. The kid's name, Toby. He was around 8 and some change. Police found him under the bridge, face down on a rock bed with all of his clothing stained. He had been gone for several days, yet his clothes, apart from being soaked, seemed relatively clean, except for when they turned him over. He was drained of blood and hollowed out, clinically so with a level of precision and brutal efficiency that showed this wasn't just some deranged maniac. Local police were dispatched in an attempt to hunt it down. A neighborhood watch was put out for the horrifying tune of the truck, and around a week and a half later, someone called in. One of the pages was the transcript of the call. Dispatch Unit 0576.
Yes, 911, what is your emergency?
Caller, redacted.
Hello? This is from 226. I'm calling about that truck with that serial killer. He's right down the block outside.
Dispatch Unit 0576.
Okay, understood, ma'am. Can I have a location?
Caller, redacted.
Yes, he's on the intersection of... and heading east. He's moving. Couldn't be more than 5 miles an hour.
Dispatch Unit 0576.
Alright, ma'am. I've got the police on their way. Stay inside and keep out of sight.
Caller, redacted.
Someone just knocked on my door. The truck just stopped.
Dispatch Unit 0576.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Local police units arrived, attempting to stop it minutes later after the truck stopped in the middle of the road. However, people in nearby houses could only hear screams followed by over 3 dozen gunshots. When more backup showed up and people sheepishly emerged from under their beds, the truck was gone, and 2 smashed, blood-covered and empty police cars were left behind. Police then ordered a stand down, and while civil servants stood down, houses started turning up empty. People got vengeful. All who acted on such vengeance went missing. It then eventually tricked up to us. To me. As you can imagine, I stopped chuckling at the notion of this thing being a killer clown right after it decided to be a child murderer and a cop killer. I had some hints of what to bring in terms of my kit from people in the industry. The Hunters Guild recommended me to bring a standard allotment of salt, silver, iron, and some holy water. Others recommended I bring different EpiPens full of antioxidants and nerve agent treatments, the same kind I had to keep in the army to protect me from a fucking chemical attack, which filled me with all kinds of warm and fuzzies. And of course, my own loadout, which was one of the benefits of being on the payroll of a coalition that could get you pretty much whatever you proved you needed. I rolled into town on a rainy-ass day. Vehicle provided was a grey SUV with full blacked-out windows and enough armor in the doors and engine to make every turn hydroplane and every acceleration sluggish. But it was comfort knowing if whatever this thing was got the jump on me, I'd hopefully be okay within the first few moments. Blacked-out windows kept everything in the vehicle nice and concealed, which helped because I rolled out in full kit, a plate carrier sporting magazines, first aid, and all other sorts of accessories they could give me. On my hip was a Glock 19X, and on my passenger seat rested an MK18. It's a 5.56 rifle, much like the AR-15 or M4, but with a shorter barrel at 10.3 inches. It might not be everyone's choice, but Eugene Stoner has saved my ass more times than I can count. The plan was simple, although probably stupid. I was gonna head to the area where most of the sightings occurred and wait there. When or if the truck showed up, I'd assess what it did and maneuver. If not, time to go trudging through the woods. I hoped for the former, because the latter was gonna be a painful trip down memory lane. So I slow rolled and crept through the rainy streets in my state-sponsored, mine-resistant spook car, keeping watch as I headed towards a nice, silent road, towards the southeastern area of the town, hugging the dense woods. I cracked open a Red Bull and waited. For 10 minutes, which turned into 2 hours and 10 minutes before I even realized, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. I was frustrated. My first hit, and I didn't even know how to actually find the thing. Here I was, camping on the side of the road, on government dime. A pit in my stomach formed as I debated with myself what to do. Then I heard it, the jingle, like someone was trying to sing while they were being cut into by steak knives and doused in salt. It came from behind, causing me to look through the tinted windows. And there I saw it. The mouth of the truck looked like a horrifying gaping maw as it slowly crept down the empty street. I took one last of my caffeine courage as I reached over and grabbed my rifle. The truck slowly moving up as I slid my pelter headset over my ears and turned on my embedder radio. "Main, this is November 1. I've got up 4 actual in my sights. Break. Approximately 30 meters to my rear and closing. Holding position inside of my vehicle. Over." On the other end, the calm voice of a man back at our Tactical Operations Center came through, albeit a bit choppy as the dense rain was having its way with our communications, trying to travel over multiple states.
Copy. November. Maintain.
I muttered and shook my head. Then, as the thing passed right by me, I swear just looking at it gave me a migraine, and not just because it looked like a hunk of rusted trash. It rolled down the road like a predator, stalking its territory, which now ran through the town, before pulling off. Maybe it was pure luck, or the tinted windows that it didn't notice me, or maybe it did, and it wanted me to, but I ended up following it. My gut told me to stay put, wait for backup, but then I quickly reminded myself that there was no backup. I was these people's saving grace. No one else, just me. I put the car in park and trailed the thing around 200 yards behind it, my rifle between my legs just in case it stopped, and I would have to engage in the same circumstance that poor lady on the 911 call did. But it didn't. The drive was long as I had to match its pace, which was slower than even my vehicle wanted to go, and through the mini monsoon, I followed it until it trailed off onto a backroads path. Thank God for whoever gave me this vehicle for including 4-wheel drive and tires with all of the traction. The mud-soaked roads were lined with gravel that barely helped any. As it started to bend, the truck went out of view, leaving me with only the bending tree lines in a forest that I swear was watching me. Eventually, I came to the top of a hill and stopped. Down a path that was flanked on both sides by tall trees opened up to an overgrown area of ferns and tall grass, where a decrepit shack stood among stone and other rubble. From the top of the hill, I inspected with a magnifier mounted just behind my EOTech sight. I had 2 avenues of approach: straight down the road, or creep through the woods. I was vastly better armed than a small town cop. However, 4 of them, including several armed locals, were dispatched with ease. I had to be smart, so against my better judgment, I put on my dark green Gore-Tex jacket underneath my plate carrier and stepped out into the pouring rain. Through my radio, I could hear MAJIN trying to contact me, to static and broken up to no avail. Against my better judgment, I turned their volume down. If nothing else, the headset would protect my ears from a hail of gunfire. I approached the steep decline into the hill going down into the woods and carefully grabbed onto trees to avoid falling down and busting my shit. Right before I slipped, a branch that I thought was sturdy betrayed me and broke, causing me to stumble, shoulder check a tree, fall down and bust my shit. I could hear the forest now. Welcome back, Dwight. Regardless, I kept moving, my eyes checking the surrounding trees as I inspected the canvas of greens, browns and blues. If it was a clown, it would stick right out. Hopefully. But I wasn't taking any chances. Every footstep was methodical, every glance was powerful. I could feel myself getting soaked, but it didn't matter. I was slowly gaining ground as I saw the shack come into view. A trait you never expect to pick up in the military is smell. Is there a fire nearby? Is the belt on the Humvee burnt and about to snap? Is that water or gasoline? And is there an enemy combatant nearby? One thing I picked up in Afghanistan is that almost all of the time, your enemy did not shower. There were many instances in which we could smell the putrid and stink of their bodies before we even saw them, warning us that the next corner may or may not have a true believer behind it. As I approached the house, I smelled not just death, but rot. The kind of smell a body gives off when it's day 5 of defending a COP in the mountains. There's a fallen combatant halfway down that's baking in the sun, but you can't go move him away, so you have to sit there and endure it while getting shot at. Had I not the iron stomach of a man so desensitized by it for years, I would have gagged instead. As I approached the shack, I realized this was the place. I quickly descended upon the truck, approaching the back door. I whipped it open and saw no one was there, then got a huge blast of putrid stink. Inside, the floor and walls were lined with blood and what I had to theorize was fecal matter. Glyphs and drawings, incoherent, were scribbled in the brown and black substance all over the cabinet, floor, and fridges of the ice cream truck. Assessing no one was inside, I made for the structure. Brown wood and rusted metal lined the shack. A mess. The front door had long since caved in, and I was confused for a moment on how to enter. That is until I spotted an old stairwell leading down. With the top of the structure a hollow mess, I realized this might be the only way down. My wet boots carefully stepped, trying to make as little noise as possible as I headed into the dimly lit cellar ahead. The smell got worse, and even as my eyes started to water from it, I pushed through. A strange warmth could be felt, only adding to my frustration as the humidity of the rain from the summer day outside was making me irritated as all hell. Despite this, my rifle was raised as I pied past the corner that led left and followed the ember lights of candles. Through my pelters, I could hear the crunching of bone and the tearing of flesh. I turned the corner to see it. It was a clown. At least, it was trying to look like one. The thing had a blue main outfit with white and red sleeves. It was standing on all fours. Its legs seemed to bend over the other way, appearing much like an insect or a thing, as its body actively crunched and contorted as it stood over a body. I looked around. Human skin hung flayed from the walls and ceiling, of all ages, of all races, sex. Horrifying caricatures of smiles, makeup, and other glyphs and writing had been carved into its skin or painted on. All of them were mouth agape, as was probably their last moments. Screaming. They were all screaming. My heart was pounding out of my chest as my eyes snapped back to the thing. Its hands grabbed over the body. Black and rotten bones seemed to protrude and break through the skin as it adapted, and consumed the body whole, peeling the skin off as it consumed the flesh and left only skin and bones. Then, it stopped. Its head spun up and around at an impossible angle and stretched, its jaws biting down as the horrifying pile of tendons and muscle that was once a human dropped to the ground. Its eyes were milky white with pinprick irises, We both stared at each other. Honestly, I think it may have been a little shocked to see me. That would last about a millisecond, as it unhinged its jaw to reveal several rows of intersecting teeth and jaw mandibles within, frilled insides as it roared the screams of all of its victims. In that moment, muzzle raised, toe-to-toe with this killer of men, I vividly remember the only thing I could think to say. Holy fuck! The thing sprung up and leaped, its enormous body somehow moving like that of a grasshopper in speed. I had to dive out of my way to the left. It came face to concrete with the basement wall as I could hear the thud and crunch of the impact. I took aim and fired. My short-barreled muzzle sending shockwaves bouncing off the walls, deafening whoever might hear. I think it even howled as 556 was sent into its center of mass. But the thing just turned and leapt at me. I kept distance, firing round after round as I put the stone pillars and columns between me and it. However, like some sort of fucking centipede, it just coiled past, its mouth wide as it leapt for me. Get bent! I shouted as I butt-stock whipped the thing, causing its head to snap back into the pillar as I shuffled away. My weapon went dry. I whipped the new magazine out and messily shoved the new one in, the bolt going, letting me know she was ready. The creature was pouring blood by this point. A disgusting yellow sludge poured out onto the floor as it howled at me and proceeded to run. While it did seem to retract, condense, I don't even know if those are the right words to describe it. It took off in its enlarged, elongated, broken joint form. And when it got to the stairs, it looked like a feral man-clown running on all fours. I took off after it, but goddamn was it fast. Between all of the dance hijinks keeping it away from me in the basement, I was breathing heavy as I ran up the stairs, then slipped a bit, banging the hell out of my knee. Of course, even while battling 10th Circle Evil, the elements decide to kneecap my chances. Literally. I can also wholeheartedly endorse that my $50-something knee pad inserts did not help. Regardless of the sight of it taking off fast enough to cause wind as it tore past Flora due west into the woods, I sprinted after it. I took aim, firing shot after shot. The snap of my suppressor followed by flashes of yellow, and howls could be heard, letting me know I was getting rounds on target. It sprinted up a slight hill, my foot dragging in the mud, and I was getting winded by this point. By the time I got up, all I could hear was shuffling, howls and giggles, the laughter, and whispers. I looked around, scanning with my rifle. With my hands shaking from all of the adrenaline, the only thing I could muster was, where in the hell did he go? The sound of the massive snapping of branches, followed by a million-toothed clown jumping right in front of me from my right, gave me my answer and caused me to stagger back straight into a tree. Mother of, is all I managed out as the back plate of my plate carrier hit a tree, cranking the absolute hell out of my neck and causing it to shake the upper branches as a hail of water fell on me. I fired off more rounds at the speeding form, flicking it to full auto and letting loose as it vanished into the brush. My rifle went dry. I loaded a new mag as it rounded another tree and prepared to make another pass with lightning-quick speeds. The sound of my rifle jamming from the rain as it tried to load the round caused my heart to launch into my throat. I looked down. It was one motherfucker of a double feet, and no amount of finger f***ing would get it in time. I looked to see the thing was maybe 15 meters from me. I transitioned to my handgun, sighting in the red dot on the thing and firing off shot after shot. From the angle it launched itself at, it took damn near every round on the face. I leapt out of the way as it slammed right into an old oak tree. I spun around, firing into the thing as it writhed, tearing chunks out of its arm, legs, and back. As the clown suit was a little more than scraps on a yellow putrid decaying body, it slumped down, rolled over to look at me. By this time, I slammed my handgun back into its Kydex holster. In a matter of seconds, my adrenaline allowed me to clear the magazine, clear the chamber, and successfully load a new round, aiming my EOTech dot right on the thing. Its massive jaw seemed to be giving way as the frills began to melt. Its eyes were a dark black and blue, falling apart as the left side of the head was actively in several pieces. The thing coughed, a mound of yellow sludge, and a digested red person flew out onto the ground in front of it. I didn't waver. I don't know why I didn't just kill it. Maybe the same reason after a slugfest, a boxer waits a moment as their opponent struggles in the corner. The thing then spoke. Its voice was high-pitched. Several voices together, bleeding in as it stared at me, growling before saying, "I just want it." I didn't give it a chance as I flicked my weapon to full auto and laid into it, every round making contact with what I hoped was a brainstem in its almost humanoid neck and head, painting the tree yellow, black, and red. As the thing slumped over, now a little more than a pile-off, was an anomaly. I caught my breath. It then twitched, and I fired off several more rounds, almost half a magazine in total. Okay, can we stop with the fuckery now? This entire situation already gave me a migraine bigger than West Wisconsin. I let my rifle hang as I stood there. I had done it. I topped off my Glock 19, pure instinct compelling me to never take my eyes off it, as I turned the volume back up on the M-bitter and tried again. This time, I got a slightly okay connection. "Maine, this is November 1. Radio check."
November 1, this is Maine. I reach you Lima Charlie, requesting set rep.
"Maine, up for actual is down. I say again, up for actual is down. Prepare for proof of Echo X-ray. Echo X-ray meaning exterminated." Mounted to the front of my plate carrier was a phone, explicitly used for communications, team coordination through markers and maps, and in this case, snapping a photo and sending it back to the TOC. Within seconds, Maine responded.
"Roger, November 1. Keep your ATAC on. Local liaisons en route to secure the area."
I got a week or so to detox from that mission, and it brought back some old memories. I remembered the feeling of post-adrenaline after my first firefight. Sitting on the gun in the mountains, the cold wind seemed even harsher after my blood's heat dropped. Sitting out on the porch of my house, overlooking the wide open plains with the Rockies in the distance as my hand calmed, I felt the same clarity I felt then. Personally, in what I thought was going to be the twilight years of my career, I had gotten a plot of land and my house smack dab in the middle of around several hundred miles of nothing. For the year prior to me joining PEXU, it was my place of exile. After the week I had, it would be my oasis for the next several years. Dossier. Situation Whiskey. It was around 0500, also known to non-military, non-Europeans, non-Pacific as 5 AM, known to me as early as hell in the morning. Despite this, I got a call from my contact at PEXU. Montgomery. He's like mid-20-ish, full-blooded English judging from the accent. This probably also makes sense as to why he decided to wake me up at the ass crack of dawn.
"Good morning, Nolan. I've got an urgent assignment I need you for,"
Monto said. I rubbed my eyes, looking at the clock, muttering, "It can't wait a few hours?"
"It's gonna take a few hours to get there, Nolan."
He laughed and quipped,
"You're also the only one close. We've got a situation whiskey we need you to take care of."
Whiskey. That caused me to sit up, now much more awake. "You're talking about..."
"You'll see in your target package."
I gazed at the fax machine as it slowly printed out every letter of data as I sipped on my Red Bull, the burning of my brain being deprived of sleep. A familiar reminder of the good old COF at 0300, weapons draw at 1300, step off at 2000. Once it completed transferring, I digested it all. A recent massacre occurred at a park in northern Minnesota that had every responding agency on high alert. In the aftermath of a particularly bad flash storm, state police reported a family of 4 going missing after being caught out in remote land. After conducting a search, they found them. What was left of them?
"Images attached,"
Montgomery said on speakerphone as I flipped through.
"Just be advised, they're detailed."
They were. You know what I learned most about animals? Whenever they kill, they do it for necessity, survival, hunger. When something is torn apart, it was done out of rage, out of spite. Animals don't have that in them. Not most, and not truly. None in the area of this. When a family of 4, including their children, are found in multiple pieces over the land area 3 square kilometers, you know it's not coincidence. So, what separates this from some serial killer, one of the hermits or forest people lurking in the rogue air caves with a sock hatchet? It was the fact that 2 of the state troopers sent out to look for them ended up in body bags. The troop they were a part of ordered a fucking stand down. That doesn't happen. When cops lose one of their own, they light a torch, and it means war. When law enforcement pulls back, it knows they're up against something out of their league. So what was it? And how the hell am I supposed to match it? All points and evidence, including this being on Algonquin territory, point to this being a situation whiskey. For those of you who don't know, the Americas are an ancient place with their own set of rules, their own gods, and their own devils that just so happen to be taking up real estate with us. It just so happens you can accidentally invoke the fuckers if you speak their names. As such, PEXU enforces a series of codes to avoid such ripples. But since this is a lock, and you have probably already deduced what it is, Situation Whiskey stands for a Wendigo. What do we know about them? Truly, they've been documented in Native American folklore since before the first explorers who came here were a twinkle in their parents' eyes. They're apex predators, and there's a reason even why the Hunters Guild, spanning many different reservations and game warden detachments, doesn't dance with them. If they don't have to, they won't. Hell, there's a reason when Vikings went inland into ancient America, they left for a reason they refused to speak of. Something that was too much for them. That's still too much for most. They're incredibly fast, lethal to the point of being a weapon of mass casualty production. And if you hear them, they already know you're there. Usually, we send multiples out, but we're all on points alert right now. I'm sorry, Nolan, but you're gonna have to go this alone. Keep comms. I'll be right there with you. Ah, yes. Send the story of the newly hired NATO-sponsored hitman tangoing with the Native American cannibal demon that just gutted an armored police cruiser not 18 hours prior. Someone either had it out for me or had extreme confidence in me. Both were impossible to differentiate. Needless to say, my approach to the target area was tense. Through the sea of brown, green, and yellow flanking either side of the highway, I couldn't stop seeing things. A slight movement here, a flash there. I was driving straight into enemy territory, and I knew it. I pulled up to the site in the middle of the day. The entire interstate road cutting through uninhabited Minnesota near it was closed off due to storm damage. I knew better, and upon breaching the perimeter, I immediately felt like I was being watched. I knew I was. Fucking goddammit. I found where the state police had gotten attacked at. My blood ran cold. One of their SUVs was completely gutted from the right side. The other had its front door torn off and strewn over the road. I grabbed my rifle, this time settling for an AK platform. The higher-powered 7.62 would do wonders more than the AR would against the foe that could shrug off from the amount of brass I counted on the ground. Nearly 210 rounds of 5.56 and too much 9mm. I stepped out and heard nothing. It was the middle of summer in a sector in which had more birds and trees than it did people. And it sounded exactly what the peaks of Peshawar did. I surveyed the area, blood and gore long since drying up on the ground. I bent down and grabbed one of the rifle brass from the asphalt of the road, moving it around the black leather of my mechanic's gloves. Shit had gone cold. Long cold. The angle of their cruisers meant they had been able to set up a defensive position, and yet they were still put to the sword. Let's hope old Kalashnikov had demonic warfare in mind when he developed his rifle platform. Regardless, I continued on. I stayed off the trail, calming my footsteps as I followed the trail of blood. The state police hadn't gone down without a fight, and the gutted trees, brass, and blood showed. Still, no sound meant it was in my area. The burning sensation told me it was watching me. This thing had taken out 2 armed state lawmen, and I was supposed to stop it? I need to stop it. I was losing my nerve, though to be fair, I lost my mind by agreeing to this. I stopped at the bottom of the trail, a large ditch where I found one of them, what was left. At the bottom of a small divot, crater thing in a clearing, half of the trooper remained as their light tan uniform was stained both red blood and black. Emphasis on half, as only one of their arms was visible and their legs were nowhere to be found. Intel we had gotten stated they were able to get their downed officers out. Yet, here she was, rotting in the forest. I don't know whether to feel bad for the troop detachment being unable to extract what was left of her, or sickened at them for lying and abandoning one of their own. It was a common occurrence when working for the government. I had to stop and pause for a moment. The gore and the sight of them still gripping the rifle out of rigor mortis as their dead tendons were damn near popping through their dehydrated flesh. Well, it almost made me lose my shit. The distant sound of a scream spurred me to life. "MSP, make yourself known." The distorted sound of a female sounded throughout the woods in the distance. MSP stood for Minnesota State Patrol. At first, I turned, raising an eyebrow. What were they doing here? Why was their presence not relayed? The only vehicles by the road were only the destroyed vehicles. A pit formed in my stomach as the voice called out again, this time sounding female. "MSP, make yourself known." Same inflection, same tone, same voice. I looked back at the deceased body of the trooper, my gloves gripping the half-mutilated skull as I flipped it over. Female. Shit. I could hear the distant sounds of branches snapping, breaking. Something was hitting at me like a cruise missile. A horrifying, retching roar that caused every part of my spine to shake as the snapping of trees and branches sent my fight or flight into activation. I had requisitioned something. An asset just for this that I knew I needed to tip. I dropped my assault pack, quickly pulling it out. A small green rectangle. I shoved its spokes into the grass and dirt near the trooper, saying a prayer of forgiveness as I placed the blasting cap connected to a spool of wire into it and untangled it. As I quickly dove through the brush on the nearby berm behind me, I barely had time to collect myself as I saw it emerge. It was, I don't know what I expected. Not the tall, lanky gaunt to almost skeletal form that ripped part of a great oak out as it approached. It stopped with enough force to shake the ground, horrifying mangled claws digging into the dirt and rock as it steadied itself. Its eyes were sunken to the point of being black pits. Its teeth were jagged, mangled, corroded from disease and decay. Its spine nearly poked through the skin. In some areas it did. The Wendigo emerged, sniffling the air and looking exactly towards me. Through the brush and branches, we locked eyes. We were just 15 meters apart. It took off towards me and didn't even see my asset I had laid for it. As it neared only 3 meters from it, coming well into distance, as it was just about to run over the claymore. I rolled down the slope of the berm, covering my head as I squeezed and hit the detonator 3 times. Click, click, click. Pucker factor setting in as I saw it move fast enough to cause light streaks. The blast of the C4 charge within the claymore was enough to riddle the ground, locks, half-cut my berm, and destroy anything and everything around it. There's a reason the front of it says, "Front towards enemy." The 700 ball bearings exploded out like a wave of deadly grey mist, shredding everything. Branches, trees, saplings were erased as the entire forest was cleared. In an instant, its dead skin wrapped tight around its skeleton was torn up, shredded in some areas as it looked akin to a torn-up death flesh blanket covering its putrefied muscles and skin. Its shoulders, torso, and hips were riddled. The beast dropped onto its back. As I rose from my cover, taking aim with my AK, my red dot centered on it as I fired. I watched 7.62 tear through its back, ripping off parts of its exposed spine as it messily took off, its roar shaking my organs and nearly making me nauseous. I took off after it, the entire time feeling like I was marching into one more trap. These things weren't dumb. This was their turf, but they didn't expect to start a turf war with a paramilitary organization, and all it took was 6 pounds of C4, 10 pounds of steel, and 4 parts hate to let it know the stakes had changed. No matter what was around the corner, I had to keep the pressure. The body of the deformed state trooper, her mangled face, that was someone's daughter, someone's wife. I was not going to join her, and no more were going to be taken like her. I let off round after round, effective fire for 570 meters when my magazine went dry and I flicked it out, replenishing my AK with a new one as I kept pace. The distance was a ways, but it was closing. I didn't relent, and it sure as hell made my pursuit a challenge, over logs, trees, damn near losing a shin as a drop the size of a sewer enveloped me. I kept pursuing through a ditch that made me feel like I was fighting in a supernatural trench warfare. Eventually, I found its lair. The black blood burned into the ground, hissing as my low-cut Solomon boots stepped around, my feet kicking what I could tell were wooden boxes and baskets. I assumed then it was just items from its victims. God, I wish I was right. The light of my weapon leading the way, piercing the darkness as I rounded past the curtain. As I found it, deep inside of the cave, it rested, dried muscles hissing as it was on its limbs, hissing and screaming as it roared, its face falling apart in chunks as it stared at me with only hate and rage in its eyes. I took aim and leveled my rifle. A set of controlled shots from the rifle ripped through its already damaged skull. I had read up on plenty of stories where old warriors needed a dagger of fire to melt the heart of the Wendigo. I guess this will substitute. It collapsed, dropping to the ground in a sickening squelch, and I finally let out one hell of an exhale as I doubled over, the exhaustion nearly making me vomit as my tack light bounced around. And noticed something. Runes on the floor that looked Eastern European and ancient lined the ground and walls, painted in a shiny, slightly silver substance. The fuck? I remember muttering as I scanned around, barely noticing the interior of the cave as I pursued it. Benches, a table, and where we stood, I had killed it on some sort of an altar, a single slab of refined granite that was carved flush into the ground. Turns out, those items I kicked around weren't the belongings of victims, but whatever residents were here. What the fuck? I looked, the rotten smell causing me to gag, as I scanned my light and noticed a slew of rotten flesh, meat, human meat. Most recently, the body of the other state trooper. All of it was perfectly cut, like some fucking sickening deli for the damned, next to the spot where it died. It had fled here. This was its lair. But all of this was too refined. Sentient, living humans had to do all of this. Then it hit me. Someone fed this thing human flesh. Something had manufactured this Wendigo. My hand shakily rose to my push-to-talk as I contacted Montgomery. Maine, this is November 1, Echo X-ray. Situation has complicated, I said as my eyes centered on a crudely drawn deer's head on the center of the altar. Back at my house, I received not another target package but a notice from the PEXU higher-ups. There was a theory to some that the increase in cryptid, anomalous, paranormal, the lethal encounters of the unearthly kind weren't by coincidence. Conspiratorial and underground movements predate the wheel and fire when it comes to humanity. And to some, they don't believe the world belongs to us, and that the unholy elements eating away at the membrane of society is the true natural order of the world. Very Wiccan, extremely genocidal. One of the images of them given was a blurry photo of a person in a white robe, stained with blood, raising a gore-covered knife in the air, as they wore an all-too-lifelike deer mask. Dossier: The Blackwood Brotherhood.